welcome to CACHE, the portable professional development podcast from CACHE. Thanks for joining us. In this episode, we're going to speak to Richie Ellison, who is the founder and director of TKO Training, Knowledge and Opportunities. And Richie's going to talk to us about inclusion and some of the methods that they use at TKO to make sure that they get the great results that they do. I'm Dawn Mulvaney, and I'm the editor of CACHE Alumni, the professional membership network for anyone working in care, childcare or early years education. You can join us for more updates, articles and resources at www.cachealumni.org.uk. But until then, Richie, can you tell us a little bit more about TKO?
Yeah, so TKO, Training, Knowledge and Opportunities. So when I was working in Welfare to Work...
Welfare to Work, what's that for anyone who doesn't know?
Or whatever benefit it might be, which is keeping you out of work. There's additional support to actually help you into work. That might be through a traditional personal advisor. It might be through a team who actually go out and engage with businesses to actually help you find jobs. It might be additional health support through physios or, a whole range of support.
So support to help people who are on benefits at the moment to get and stay in jobs. That's great. Don't really understand how that got you into a boxing gym.
I worked in the welfare to work sector for a good number of years now, over 10 years. My background growing up was sport. My dad was a professional footballer and my mum still to this day is 65 years old, fitness instructor, and still takes fitness classes in our boxing gym, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. Back then and still to this day, businesses often had a stereotypical attitude to somebody who was claiming benefits, and I think even, like I say, to this day, sometimes the media dictates what interpretation somebody has of somebody who's on benefit. For example, there'll be a particular TV station, for example, which I won't name, where every night or every other night there seems to be a documentary about such and such on benefits. So it could be my big fat benefits wedding. It could be, I even got to a stage where I saw a programme advertised, and I must admit I did watch a little bit of it before switching it off, my dog on the door. You know what I mean? It was just like, how far do you want to go? But that was portraying everybody in that same light.
Yeah, there's definitely a demonisation there, isn't there?
I think so. But everything I do, I try and change a negative into a positive. So when I was working with the long-term unemployed, I would say, this is how you're being portrayed. You've got to overcome that. You've got to make sure that people don't see it as my dog on the door TV program or life on benefits type scenario. So anyway, going back to my role then, and things weren't really working well, potentially because of the situations we just spoke about, or you did have a lot of individuals who were victims of circumstances, and we'll probably talk a bit about victims of circumstances a little bit more as we go along.
So as well as the businesses needing to understand a little bit more about the real life of people who might be long-term unemployed rather than what they've seen on the telly, does that mean that there was some mind changing to do on the other side maybe as well?
So they might have been third, fourth generation unemployed, and it's all they've known, so it's come right from the top, if you like, that's the norm, to be out of work. It can be quite daunting for, say, a family of a single mother where she's got 3 kids. How am I actually physically going to be better off going to work?
And I think that we could get quite deeply into that if we wanted to. I mean, you've also got the whole thing around homelessness and people living in supported accommodation where the cost of rent's higher than the cost of private accommodation. So once somebody goes into work and their housing benefit won't cover that anymore, and they're stuck, that might result in them actually going back on the streets.
And a lot of people don't see that. So they'll see somebody who's living in a bedsit, for example,
and they shout, "Get a job!" Not understanding what that actually means.
It's costing £250, £300 a week for the... No, it can't. It can't be £300 a week. Well, actually, there's a whole support system which goes behind that hostel, which obviously tops up the cost. But as I mentioned, growing up I was brought up in a sporting background, so my dad in the late 60s, early 70s was a professional footballer, certainly nowhere near to the level of earnings that they earn in this day and age, and my mum a fitness instructor. So I casted my mind back to think, right, well, when I was growing up, and even when my dad stopped playing professional football, and when I was a little, and he was playing for his local pub teams or whatever, we always had a massive social circle of friends, and there was always something going on, whether that be a barbecue, a wedding do, a birthday, or just a gathering of some sort. And there was nobody out of work, or if there was somebody out of work, there was always somebody there to
so that community was really important.
It was a social circle, or my mum's gym friends or whatever, and even when my mum and dad split up, we still had those social circles going on, and there was always somebody there to look out for somebody. So I thought, well, the social circles which a long-term unemployed person might be dealing with, they might not have a social circle. Their social circle might be exist of somebody on the other end of the Xbox, you know, somebody on the other end of a completely different country. So in the classroom environment, learning environment, typical classroom learning environment, and from that, when we're talking about people with long-term unemployed issues, that might be being put in a classroom and getting taught how to write a CV, for example. Now, for somebody who's been out of work for 4 or 5 years, they might have been in the classroom getting taught how to write a CV or prepare themselves for an interview 10, 15, 20 times, and it hasn't worked for them. A classroom hasn't motivated them in the first place, hence they've maybe not done very well academically, school hasn't turned them on, college and university hasn't turned them on, but then we're putting them back in a classroom as an adult and telling them this is how you, and they just don't want to be there.
And you can see that straight away when you put a group of people who don't want to be in a classroom together. You can tell immediately that they don't want to be there.
So it was up in North Shields at the time, which for those outside of the area is a old shipping sort of docking area, old shipbuilding area of North Tyneside, and the shipbuilding sort of went by the wayside, and people fell on tough times. And the organisation I was working for at the time, these classroom environments weren't working for them, and we had incidents where there was guys literally throwing chairs across the room at tutors and all the rest of it. So I got sort of asked to step in and say, Richie, what can we do here? So I said, okay then. So I took a group of guys, it was about 15, 16 fellas. I say guys, they were 18, and they were all men, this particular group, 18 plus. From 18 up to, I think the oldest was early 50s. And all I said was, right, okay then, I'm going to book the local five-a-side football centre. We're going to go there twice a week. We'll have a game of five-a-side, but on the basis that on the five-a-side, after the five-a-side, we'll sit down at the football centre and do some stuff around actually really what's going to help you find work. So maybe it's not around your CV, it's actually what you're actually doing yourself and being proactive and trying to get out there and find work and doing some life mapping and, you know, what's your life going to look like if you carry on the way you're going, or what can the bright future hold for you if you actually sort of take the bull by its horns.
Which has to provide more value than sitting in a classroom going over how to write a CV for the 11th time.
Exactly. So it sort of spiraled from there. I think the light bulb moment for me from that one particular group of guys that I was working with at the time, there was one guy, I'll not name his name, but he was mid-40s and all he wanted to do was actually be a football coach. But he had, his barrier to employment was he had a bit of a bad breakup with his partner at the time. They'd had a child, they'd split up pretty much just weeks after the birth of the child, and she'd stopped him from seeing his son. And he went off the rails a little bit, and she'd sort of got an injunction put against him to stop him from seeing the child. He was putting letters through the letterbox and, you know, I want to see my son. But having a young son myself, and now I could sort of understand his frustrations, rather than actually just automatically telling him he'd done the wrong thing.
Yeah, and no one's the villain in their own fairy tale. Everyone does things intending to do the right thing for them and theirs.
And to be fair, to this guy, he wasn't running away from being a father. He was actually trying to fight for being a father.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just done it in the wrong way. But that led to him actually having something on his record which prevented him from working with children. He hadn't touched a child, he hadn't abused a child, he hadn't hit anybody.
But he had a story.
But he had a story behind him. So anyway, as a reward for us working with this group of lads, I'd put a game on at St James's Park against a number of employers. So we identified a number of employers from different business sectors that these guys wanted to work with. And we said to these employers, we want you to come play on St James's Park, and we're going to play against a group of long-term unemployed people. Of course, the employers loved that. They wanted to play on St James's Park. Of course, the unemployed people, a lot of them couldn't afford to go and watch Newcastle United. Not like you'd want to go and watch Newcastle, they're not terrible at the minute. But, they couldn't afford to go and watch a game, let alone play on the pitch. This was like an amazing incentive for them.
Yeah, and for me, just to pick up on something that you said there, sorry Richie, that the thing about what you just said is that you invited employers that group of blokes wanted to work for, not just employers that were easy to engage.
Yeah.
Or employers who wanted to be involved the other way around.
Exactly. So the way I pitched it for the guys who I was supporting was, this is almost like an interview process for you. So say we had some lads who just wanted to work in construction. We'll get the construction company into play on that day, and your attitude and behaviour, don't go kicking them up a height, don't go swearing, be professional on the pitch, shake his hand afterwards,
and start
building that relationship through a game of football. That's your foot in the door. That's your introduction, and that's your way of selling yourself as an individual. The companies knew what we were there for in the first place, but it was allowing to open doors where historically they might have been shut by a blank CV or one which had even just got thrown in the bin. So this one guy we were talking about, he played on that day, and he got man of the match, which was great. At the end of the game, we were having a bite to eat and a drink at the football ground, and he had his elderly mother who was in her 70s, 80s at the time, and he said, Richie, he says, I want to introduce you to me mum. And she was like, oh, I can't believe what you've done. This isn't me who's done it. He's got himself motivated. We've just challenged things in the right way for him, and tackled it in the way he wanted to be listened to and what was going to motivate him, and that just happened. That football was the mechanism to do that. So we had a good chat with his mum, and he was with his brother-in-law as well, and he went, Richie, he says, I want you to introduce you to somebody else. So along came this little lad, hugging on to this fella I'd been supporting, and he went, this is my son, and he was 5 years old, and he went, this is the first time I've ever seen him since he was 5 weeks old, and I knew all the background behind it. And he went, had it not been for this game of football a day at St James's Park, he went, I don't know whether I would have access to him. So one between me trying to hold back my tears, I was it was like a light bulb moment. I was like,
this works.
This works. This hasn't just helped somebody be motivated to find a job. It's actually brought him back to his son, which was his barrier in the first place.
And probably his motivation for looking for work.
And it still is, and that was over 10 years ago now. And from what I understand, he's going on to great things. And that was the light bulb moment, So from then on, I started developing programs with the Premier League and the Premier League football clubs, working with them in their communities and partnering different ideas they had around social inclusion programs, more focusing around working with adults, because what I quickly found was that football clubs would focus heavily on socially excluded kids, which is absolutely great and doing some fantastic work, but they were forgetting that socially excluded kids were typically coming from socially excluded mums and dads or parents or guardians, but there was little being done with them. So I started developing that, developing other, moved on into new other contracts and developed a network of key individuals who were part of the TKO team, likes of Olivia Bernard, ex-Newcastle United footballer, Natasha Jonas, GB Olympic boxer, Samantha Quinn, who runs our fashion program, whereas we used different topics but having key individuals who had a true story behind them. So for example, Olivier, me and Ollie are very close. We've worked together for around about 8 or 9 years now, and Ollie's background is priceless because people from the outside in see him and think of him being this superstar millionaire footballer in a big mansion.
And I think that was the draw when we used to work together for people that you were working with, was that they saw this personality and this person that they recognised in it, and it made them want to get involved with the stuff that you were doing.
But they didn't know his background. So Ollie's background was, but his parents are from Guadeloupe, born and raised in Paris. His career could have gone a completely different direction in terms of him with the wrong crowd, friends going to prison, etc., etc. Was exceptional at football, found his way to Newcastle, didn't speak the language, took himself to university, learned English, got sent out on loan to Darlington in the lower league, so learned his apprenticeship, if you like, and then Bobby Robson saw all the potential in him, played football in Champions League, had everything, so he'd gone from almost having nothing to having everything, got injured at 27 and had to retire at 27. So he's gone from having everything to then all of a sudden that's gone and taken away. By Ollie's all admission, he'd done the partying afterwards and all the rest of it, but then thought, actually, I'm not a footballer anymore. I've had to retire from the game. What do I do with my life now? So, and then rebuild and done some great things in the community and working with organisations like Show Racism the Red Card, going into schools, teaching them about equality and diversity, etc. So TKO was sort of formed out of those ideas, and so we've been up and running as we're in our own right now for just over, we're coming up to 3 years now, which is great. It's allowed us to expand our portfolio in areas which I was really passionate about. So for example, one of the biggest passions I had was working in prisons and how we can actually make a positive.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm quite passionate about as well, in terms of, in a previous role I worked with people who had recently been released from prison and who had signed on to look for work, and the crossover between those people and the people accessing homelessness support are massive. When people get released from prison, I think the general population thinks that that's it, that they're done, that's the end of their sentence, but it's not. There's a huge role and stigma that comes with that, and a lot of people who go on to reoffend do so because actually life outside of prison's quite tough after you've got that conviction. What is it that TKO do differently to some of those other services that are out there or that existed before TKO came along?
So we've worked in the prisons now for probably around about 18 months and ran about 18 programs in that time for 6 prisons now. Most recently Birmingham prison, we were in 2-3 weeks ago now, and obviously that's massively in the spotlight at the moment. It's got the worst inspection in the country. The government had taken it off private hands. And that was predominantly because of a number of issues. Violence is very, very high in there, as in a majority of the prisons we work in. Substance misuse, particularly around synthetic cannabinoids, or what people probably hear in the newspapers or in the media is the spice issue they have in the prisons. Illegal phones, bullying, debt. So from the outside in, if we talk about debt, for example, in prisons, people who don't have a knowledge of prisons might think, how is there any debt in prisons? Well, they've got no bills to pay, so how on earth can they have debt? Well, actually, there's a hell of a lot of debt in there, because there's a hell of a lot of drug dealing in prisons, and one thing leads to another. People are very vulnerable in prisons and can be easily led into things that they particularly don't want to be involved in. So we've been asked to tackle those issues within the jails. We've been doing very, very well within those establishments, not just here in the northeast, or in the Midlands in Birmingham, as I mentioned, but also up in Scotland as well, where prisons are constantly getting us back in, which shows that we're doing the right thing. My opinion on working within the prisons is, and one of the reasons why I've got a lot of friends who've gone to prison, whether that be in prison now or have spent time in prison. So from understanding what their frustrations were in prison, it allowed me to actually come up with a solution. A lot of it's to do with boredom, and a lot of it's how you actually speak to the prisoner as well. A lot of prisoners, they understand that they're there to be punished, but my personal opinion on a prison is that if they weren't there to be rehabilitated, then why have a prison in the first place? You've got to give somebody the opportunity to be rehabilitated. Not everybody wants to be rehabilitated, you know. Let's not beat about the bush here. People will see prison as a stopgap to return to crime. For us, we've got to educate them as that you can't live your life like that. But if you're not going to try and rehabilitate somebody, then what's the point in the process? You might as well just stick them in a building, lock it, throw away the key, and just not give them any support. So again, we'll use different methods in terms of how we engage them, but it might be, for example, myself and Olivier will run our football program, but it's not just going in there and playing football with them. Will be an incentivization program, so good behaviour will be rewarded with football, for example, and it's we've got a system where it's not a typical game of football. We've got a reward and recognition tool behind
and
that.
When you talk about good behaviour, do you see good behaviour maybe differently to what the prison might say is good behaviour in terms of compliance?
Good behaviour in a prison might be turning up for education, for example. Good behaviour might be going to work, and by going to work, if it's a closed prison, it might be that the majority of prisons now are what we call working prisons. So they might be working in a kitchen, they might be working on maintenance, they might be working on reception, so as new prisoners are coming through the door. There's lots of different roles, but they've still got to turn up for that, and if they don't turn up for that, then rewards and privileges may be taken away from the actual inmate themselves, or residents as some prisons call them now. But we'll tackle a hell of a lot of things, so probably out of a 5-day programme, we'd be in there, and maybe for a day, an hour out of that day might be the football element, and then we'd be in the classroom tackling things like equality and diversity. Now, an equality and diversity session, if you had pinned that up on the wall in a prison to say, and through traditional methods, we have an equality and diversity session, which is going to be for an hour and a half. Who's interested? Nobody would turn up, let's be real. Whereas we're getting them sitting discussing equality and diversity for an hour and a half in quite what could be quite a volatile situation, where we're tackling around Islamophobia, homophobia, equal rights.
So you're talking about things that are quite ingrained within prisons, where you have actually got separate communities for separate groups.
I'd give you an example. We were running a programme in Home House Prison in Stockton not so long ago, 2 or 3 months ago, and we were running this session for, there was 22 guys on this course, and we give them a particular scenario which opens up discussions about a number of different topics around equality and diversity, and we were talking about homophobia, or we're talking about sexualities, and there was a huge wall put up around homophobia amongst the prisoners. The guys, I would say 75% of them don't want to have anything to do with gay guys. Quite happy to have something to do with a gay woman, but not a gay guy. I knew that was bravado, but in that situation, it's almost like, who's the alpha male? Because I don't want to be, if he's sitting next to us saying that he doesn't like gay guys, I'm going to follow his suit, so it was like black sheep type thing. And this went on for about 10 minutes. Me and Ollie just sort of sat back and soaked it all in and listened, until there was one guy in that room who was the big guy of the group, if you like, you know. Big, strapping, 6'5" guy. Sort of went to look at it, you wouldn't want to mess with this fella.
Everyone's going to agree with this guy.
He didn't say anything, and then he just chipped up. He went, lads, my son's gay. And the whole place went silent. And I looked at him and he went, my son's gay, he's 15. He says, I've got other kids as well. He says, but my son's gay and I don't have a problem with it. And he went, any of you have got sons, what would you do if he was gay? And all of that attitude's changed. And he hadn't told, and he'd been in the prison for a few years, and he hadn't told anybody in the prison. But for him to actually sit up in front of everybody in this discussion and actually open up and say my son's gay was quite a sort of like an inspiring moment. We're able to tackle those types of topics where historically that would have never been possible. We had 22 fellas on that course, and it was the first time in Home House's history that they'd ever had a 100% success rate where they had a group start a program and finish a program.
But that's not just the football. So you were saying
we had lads who didn't play football
as an incentive,
but
what is it that you're doing differently in the way that you're engaging with this group of blokes?
I don't prejudge the individual. I think the easiest thing for me to do would be to see who I'm working with and Google them, and I'll be open and honest with you, and that I have done that in the past when we first started running the programs, and I wish I hadn't done, because you get to find out some of the actual offences that they've actually caused. And I'm not talking like massively serious offences, but because I have worked with individuals where they were so polite, very, very accommodating, and couldn't do enough for it. Role model people to have on the course, and then I've looked at their history and I thought, I wish I hadn't read that, because I haven't prejudged them, and I don't want to prejudge them moving forward. So that's something I quickly learned not to do. So I think that's really important, is that we'll talk to them on a way that they want to be spoken to. We're not going to patronise them in any way. We'll challenge them, and we'll not be frightened to challenge them.
So for you, going into a prison and working with a group of blokes in prison is just the same as if you came into our offices today and worked with a group of my colleagues around the same sort of issues. And
this is the thing, the message I keep on, no matter what group I'll say to, and what group I'm working with, whether that be a group of 12-year-olds, whether it be a group who just need some additional support, whether it be a group, somebody who's a lifetime sentence in a prison, I'm no better than that individual, and that individual's no better than the next person. Everybody has got the ability within them to actually achieve great things. Yes, they might have done bad things in the past, but don't let the past dictate your future. And I think you've got to have that mutual respect and being able to build that rapport, where they actually go, I've got trust in Richie, and I'll put my faith in Richie. And being able to follow through with your promises is the other thing. So if I say that I'm going to do something for somebody, I'll do it. If I don't think I can do it, I'll not make a promise to think, I'll do that for you. But knowing that, fine, well, I'll not be able to do it. And so many times, for example, just yesterday, I got a email from a lad who's just been released from Birmingham prison, thanking us, saying, I'm settled back into my family life now. I really enjoyed the course. It's shed some new light on how I want to progress my career, because he had just written himself off because he thought that he was a prisoner and nobody was going to.
Do you think that a lot, that the people that you engage with, whether it's prisoners, whether it's young people, whether it's people with disabilities or barriers, do you find a lot that they've written themselves off? That it's them that has decided they can't?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of the times is victims of circumstances. Potentially they've had no role model in their life, or little encouragement for themselves in the first place, which has led to them to believe themselves that they're not going to be of any use to anybody. And I think as well, they judge themselves but think other people are going to be judging them. So for us, it's about being able to extract all of them great things that they've got with them. And one of the ethoses with TKO is that you don't have to be great with a pen and paper to achieve great things in your life. And how many jobs is there now where you necessarily don't need to be great at English and maths? For me, it's more about personality and attitudes. Now, if I can sell somebody's personality and attitude, or somebody came to me with a great attitude and wanted to work for me, I would take that 9 times out of 10 over somebody who didn't have any personality but had 10 years worth of experience. We obviously work with a good number of employers, and we've got some fantastic employer relationships which we've built over the years. And time again, employer will say to me, Richie, I'm not bothered about the experience, all I'm bothered about is attitudes. If you can send me somebody who's going to turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning and put the graft in till 5 o'clock and be there the next day, and that's all I want. And then once they're in there and showing that attitude, I can build them up. If that's what they want to do and progress their career, I can do that. We've got a fantastic relationship with a company in Newcastle called Inspired Outsourcing, which are a contact centre in Newcastle. So they've got some big contracts for the likes of big energy suppliers and mobile phone companies in this contact centre. And myself and Olivier, this was probably going back 8 years ago now, we were running one of our football programs. We had a guy there who's at the time would have been early 40s, mid 40s. Never worked in, I think it was 12 or 13 years. Completely written himself off. And he came to us. He was a massive Liverpool fan. I remember that because he used to come every day in his Liverpool tracksuit, even though he was a Cockney. And the light bulb moment for him was he had 2 young boys, and they were sort of getting picked on a little bit at school because they didn't have the nice trainers, they didn't have their Xboxes. Their dad was picking them up from school. That was another thing. So if dad can pick us up from school, how when all the other dads are working? So anyway, at the end of our week, we took them into Inspired Outsourcing in Newcastle, and I had that relationship with them in that we didn't have to go suited and booted. We'd left from the football training field, if you like, into their office in the tracksuits and what have you. The company Inspired were totally cool about that we had the good relationship. They loved the fact that Olivier was going to come in and have photographs and chat with the staff and all the rest of it, but really bought into the values of what it is we were trying to achieve. So anyway, we were in there on the Friday afternoon. They learned about the company, they'd listened into some calls, etc. And Tracy, the manager, the HR manager, said, Richie, who's that there? Who's that big fella there? He seems really bubbly and all that. And bear in mind that this was very much like quite a youthful, jovial sort of environment, you know. Average age is probably about 21, so 22.
Quite a young, cool company.
Yeah. They've all got their designer gear on and all the rest of it. The lads have got their sleeve. In fact, the lasses have got sleeve tattoos, and you know, it's all quite a hip, cool type place. So this guy probably wasn't your typical guy who you would picture working there. He sort of stood out a little bit from the norm. But anyway, Tracy seen something in him, and he was just walking about, but he showed a really good attitude. He was asking lots of questions, he was engaging with the staff. And she said, who's that there? So I told him, didn't go into the full detail, just, that's it, this is who he was, this is how long he's been out of work for. She says, do you think you'd like to have an interview here? I says, I don't know, I'll go and ask him. So I says, they want to interview you? He went, oh, when? Like next week or something? I went, no, she wants to interview in 45 minutes time. Shut up, man, he said. I says, yeah. I says, just go for it, just be yourself. She's seen something in you. Just, you know, she's not going to throw loads of pressure on you. She obviously wants to chat to you and tell you and interview you for the job. Okay, I'm going to go for it. So in he went, got the job offer after that interview. That was on the Friday. He started on the Monday. Tracy rang us on the Friday, and she went, Richie, I need to speak to you about this guy. And I went, oh no, what's happened? She went, he's absolutely amazing, this fella. I went, right, okay, that's great. What's happened? She says, oh well, he's the time he's been here in Grad Bay or whatever they'd call it, which was like an induction process, he smashed his targets, everybody loves him, blah 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 blah. He's now there as a manager of that same company, doing the recruitment for new staff, running sales teams, and still keeps him out at Christmas. How's you and Ollie? Can we meet up? Blah blah. Can't thank you for enough. I remember that the first Christmas after he'd got the job, texted us, he went, Richie, he went, thank you to you and Ollie, I can buy my son that Xbox this Christmas. You know, and that meant the world to me. And he's still there now, still for the same company, you know, winning awards for them. He's done loads of PR and press stuff for us.
Do you think it helps in terms of you're saying he does some of the recruitment for him to understand
Totally.
the journey of some
Totally,
of the people
totally. So I was, this guy who I've mentioned emailed me yesterday from Birmingham prison saying that he's been released and what have you. I had conversations with this guy because he was saying, I don't know where I'm going to go because of my criminal background. And this guy was in jail for non-payment of fines, by the way, okay? But he'd been in jail, okay? So an employer's not going to look that he's for non-payment of fines.
I don't think that a lot of people listening to this will know that that's still a thing.
Yeah.
That people still go to prison for not being able to pay their debts.
Yeah, okay? So this guy was in prison for not paying his debts, okay? And he was really articulate. We were in there for the week and he was being released on that Tuesday. So he could have thought, well, I'm getting out next Tuesday, I'm not bothered about doing all this equality and diversity, enterprise, self-employment, you know, drug and alcohol awareness,
I can see
all
the
that.
finish line.
Yeah, but he didn't. He totally engaged in the whole week. And I said, you know what you would be great at, mate? I went, you would be great as an advisor dealing with ex-offenders, helping them into work. You know, why would I be good at that? I went, because you can associate and you understand the barriers, you understand the challenges, you know what it's like to have been in prison and the problems that it's occurred for you and your family. I went, you would be perfect at that.
And some of the best people I used to work with in youth homelessness were advisors who had been homeless in the past. Experience
Breeds knowledge, doesn't it, at the end of the day? And you've got to be able to associate with the person you're supporting. Hence, I think, which is why we do such a great job. It goes down to treating everybody the same, being able to be flexible from one person to the next. One person's demands and what makes one person tick might be completely different to the next, but your approach has got to be tailored to that individual, or being able to bring out the best and identifying what I don't ever try and focus on somebody's weaknesses and developing a weakness. Let's look at your strengths first and build on them. Our boxing gym's a great example of the variation which we actually deal with in there. So boxing's been a passion of mine for a long time, and we've got a fantastic mentor for TKO outside of our gym where we run our boxing intervention programs in Natasha Jonas. So Tash was the first female to represent GB in the London 2012 Olympics as a boxer. Great role model, typical Scouser, you know, very bubbly, very chatty, very charismatic.
So she really lives up to that stereotype.
Yeah, she's class. She's absolutely brilliant as Tash. But inside of our boxing gym, I think from people without the knowledge of boxing, they might have an idea of what a boxing gym actually looks like. So
yeah, I've never been in a boxing gym.
So what's yours?
Of a boxing gym
what's yours? Is what would it be?
Grubby room full of sweaty blokes, all wanting to beat each other up.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
Maybe a little bit of camaraderie around.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I've been in a few of those around the country myself, so that does go on. But I think when you're actually involved in a boxing gym, it's very much a family unit. We've got on our wall, and we actually call our boxing gym, it's TKO Boxing and Learning Centre, because we've got a classroom in there. We've got like a 16-seater classroom in there, which overlooks the boxing ring. So it's not a TKO Boxing Gym, it's TKO Boxing and Learning Centre. So that sort of sets us out straight away. People can identify exactly what we actually are there. On the wall, we've got a huge hashtag TKO family thing on the wall. So it is everybody who comes in there, regardless of their race, religion, sexuality, background, income status, job status, whatever, education. As soon as you step foot through that door, everybody is treated the same. Everybody will look out for everybody. And again, going back to what I said at the start about social circle, often is the case that somebody coming through the door wouldn't have had a social circle or that support mechanism around it, and now we're actually giving them that. So I know that if somebody genuinely wanted to work or was out of work, I could get them a job within, give us 2-3 months maximum. If they wanted a job, I would get them that. We're already helping lads from our gym get work. We're helping kids come off the streets. You know, we're averaging 30, 40, sometimes up to 40 kids on a class. It's one of the most deprived wards north of Tyne, if not the most deprived ward in terms of social housing, low incomes, etc. And we're pulling people not just from that area, but from very affluent areas, coming and mixing them two together. Whereas historically that would be very, very difficult to do.
Do you think that helps people to realise that everyone is just a person?
Exactly.
It doesn't matter where you come from.
Doesn't matter where you come from. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, we've got a little lad who comes to us. He came in the gym last night. The gym's freezing cold. We're getting new heating put in at the moment because it's quite a big space we've got. So come the winter, it can get very cold without this new heating, which will be switched on hopefully in the next couple of weeks once we get the job finished. But so it was cold in there last night. Kids were coming in with their big puffer jackets on. Some of them had the designer gear on and what have you, know, looking fresh. Little lad come in and he just had his t-shirt on. He's got ADHD, this lad. So boxing gym can be a very intimidating place for somebody with ADHD to just put in with kids where you've got to... Boxing is about so many life skills, discipline, structure, motivation, you know, following instructions if you're getting coached. So somebody, little lad at 8 years old, 9 years old with ADHD, really challenging environment.
There's quite a lot of concentration involved in boxing
Huge,
as well, isn't there? You've really got to know what's going on.
Huge. But he came into the gym last night when it was freezing cold and he just had his little t-shirt and his tracksuit bottoms on. I says, "You're freezing, man." I says, "Come on, get the skipping ropes up, we'll get warmed up." He went, "It's warm in here." I says, "Are you kidding me?" I says, "I've got my coat on and yeah, it's cold." He says, "Well, no." He says, "My house is like an ice box." I says, "Why? Can your mum put the heating on?" Or you went, "Oh no, she hasn't got the money, we've got no heat, she can't afford to put the heating on." He says, "We just sit on the settee and got a huge blanket and me and my mum just cuddle up together and watch telly and that's how we keep warm, cuddling into each other."
I mean, for people who are listening who maybe aren't from Newcastle, a young lad from Newcastle to disclose that he cuddles up with his mum on a night time with a blanket is probably quite a big deal in and of itself, isn't it?
In a boxing gym amongst other boxers saying I cuddle into my mum to keep warm. Of course it is. But it's the environment we've put him in where he feels comfortable to actually disclose that information to her. You know, we've had a few incidents in the gym and obviously all of our coaches go through child safeguarding courses, and so everybody's got all those accreditations and being educated around child safeguarding, where kids are openly disclosing quite sensitive information to us, which they haven't spoke about, whether that be things going on at home or in their personal lives, and we've got to deal with that in the right way, you know. But it's nice that the kids have got that relationship with us where they feel comfortable enough to actually what we've identified and found out in that boxing gym isn't just about somebody who's good at hitting a bag or might be a decent little boxer, boys or girls. It's actually the bigger scale of what's going on outside of that gym. Okay, has that gym identified a much bigger issue which needs to be supported and tackled?
And is that support that you have the links to then put in place to help them to make those improvements and to live better lives outside of the gym itself?
Exactly. So that might be where we, luckily through England Boxing, who our club's affiliated club to through England Boxing Association, they have strict child welfare and safeguarding policies, and then your child welfare officers, which things would be reported into if necessary. Okay, or we've got good relationships with the local schools, where if it was an issue which needed to be taken back to the local school, we can tackle that. We work a lot with the local schools, and particularly with those who are on the brink of being suspended or expelled from school. So they'll come in once a week to the boxing gym, and as a reward of keeping out of trouble, they'll come into the boxing gym. Now, somebody, again, looking from the outside might think, well, they're being bad, so why are you rewarding them, teaching them how to box? Well, it's actually not. It's teaching them that discipline, structure, decision making, all those things I've mentioned before are vital. So it's about what intervention can you put in place to actually teach them, well, actually, it's not the way you want to go, and using our experiences to actually show, giving them actual real life examples of this is what your life might look like if you don't knuckle down and book your ideas up. So, you know, we work with a great organisation called Foundation Futures, who are fairly local to the gym, and they work with young people who have already been excluded from education, working with a group of kids around 15, 16 at the moment. I had them in the gym last week, and I was giving them the chat about what TKOs do within the prisons and how it isn't a nice place to be, because one of them piped up straight away and thought, oh, it's just a holiday camp, you get everything in jail, man. That was me, like, believers, you don't want to be. Yes, some jails are better than others, you know. I've been in jails where it's spick and span, the staff are fantastic, they've all got good relationships, education is brilliant, and there's things put in place. But I've also been been in prisons where there's no windows in the cells because they're all smashed out. You know, you're sharing a room which has got a bunk bed in it, and it's probably about 6 foot wide by 6 foot. 6 foot wide by about 8 foot long. And you're sharing that with somebody else, and the toilet's next to your bunk bed, so you've got to go to the loo in front whilst your mate's lying down in bed, and that's it, you know, and it's freezing cold. And then your life after that, you can't get a job because employers have got a stigma against you because you've been to prison, blah blah blah. Another lad had said, well, my dad's told us I'll end up in jail. So what I was saying to that lad is, right, well, you've got to prove your dad wrong then, haven't you? If you want to achieve something in life, there'll be people there around you who can support you, but ultimately you've got to do that for yourself. You know, nobody, I'll say to the lads, you're not going to walk down the town centre or the city centre and somebody's going to stop you in the middle of the street and go, there's your dream job, there's 50,000, do you want a job there, it's £50,000 a year, and it's exactly what you want to do. Nobody's ever going to do that, but you might have to start somewhere. So I'll always say to them, like, what is your dream job? You know, one of the lads said last week he wants to be a scaffolder. He says, that is my dream job, being a scaffolder. Okay, what's stopping you being a scaffolder? Well, I haven't got my qualifications, I don't know where to start. Okay, then, well, let's look at what's going to get you. You've got to start on the ladder.
Backwards career planning can be a really valuable tool, can't it? Saying, this is where I want to be in the future, and these are all the steps I'm going to take to get us there.
Exactly. You know, we do a lot of stuff around enterprise and setting themselves up in business, you know. Take your negative and turn that into a positive. Otherwise, you're never going to get over them. Don't let this little bit in the middle of your success be what's going to determine what's going to be moving forward. Forget about it.
That's a great message. I could talk to you all day about this, but first of all, there's somebody outside waiting for our room, and unfortunately I have much less interest in parts of my job that I also have to do.
Hi everyone, it's Dawn from Now back. At this part of the recording of the podcast, we had to give up our room, so Richie and I sort of conversed a little bit later on, and I did ask him if he could let us know if there was one thing he could say to sum up how he works around all of this stuff and how TKO sort of works. What would that be?
Dad brought us up on a saying, it costs you now to be nice. It doesn't cost you a penny to be nice to somebody. And if you're nice and they remember you from being that nice person, they might not need you there and then. There'll come a time where in the future they'll need you, or they'll be able to recommend you to somebody who does need you. So never be afraid to be nice. Costs you now to be nice. Always have a smile on your face. That's my biggest tip I can give you.
Thank you so much to Richie for giving up his time to come in and talk to me at CACHE Towers. If you would like to speak to me or tell me why what you do is amazing and you'd like to share your best practice, please feel free to get in touch. You can get me at dawn.mulvaney@cache.org.uk, or the much easier to remember email address alumni@cache.org.uk. You can also connect with us with me on LinkedIn or with CACHE Alumni on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll be back soon to either talk about some amazing things that are going on in the sector or to interview other specialists and other people who are working on the ground to share their knowledge and their best practice with our network. So stay up to date by making sure that you've got the newsletter box ticked in the My Account section of CACHE Alumni, or keep an eye on the website itself for updates on when podcasts are coming out. You can also subscribe to the channel on Podbean, or find us in your podcasts app. Thanks very much. Until next time, take care.